when you're hosting an Olympic Games, as I said, it's not about the 2 weeks. The 2 weeks will come and go, but what you're trying to achieve at the larger level is what needs to be considered. Watching that table tennis medal come by was interesting. Watching a lot of our shooters win was spectacular. Winning with world records, etc., was really wonderful to see. Let's give it a chance and let's see what the government comes up with, what the IOA comes up with. They have an important role to play in the whole scheme of things as well. 40 medals in 2036. I mean, it's a fair ask. Carefully the whole reform process that has taken place under Agenda 2020 and under Agenda 2020+5, a lot of emphasis has been really put into making the games sustainable and making the games work. Of course, it also much depends on the sort of project that India comes up with, right? I mean, that is yet to be ascertained. I mean, at least I'm not privy to the information that is required to really make an informed decision. I mean, we don't even know at the moment. We have a region being talked about, but is that the final decision? First the finalization on an area of where we want to host the games has to take place. Whether is it one region, whether is it multiple regions, we don't know. And it all boils down to the sort of legacy planning that goes around this project that has to take place. You also have to consider the two factors, right? There is one factor of the operational expenses that are related to hosting an Olympic Games. And I think a lot of the expenses which are often mistaken are the developmental costs which a city undertakes as legacy of the games, whether it be building an airport, whether it be building public transport, whether it be building in other basic infrastructure. So you have to almost consider two different budgets here. One is the actual operational budgets of hosting the games, and one is a budget which is all your legacy infrastructure that you're building for the Olympics, or using the Olympics as the catalyst to build that infrastructure. So all in all, it really depends on what we come up with. We don't know what our project is. I'm not sure what our plan is, what is the legacy planning behind it. I think that is still in the works, and I think let's give it a chance and let's see what the government comes up with, what the IOA comes up with. They have an important role to play in the whole scheme of things as well. I mean, if we have to host an Olympic Games, I think no one will disagree with what I have said, that we'd want a strong performance of our athletes. And 40 medals in 2036. I mean, it's a fair ask for all what we're doing and for all what we should aim for that. No question about that. So, it's difficult to choose one over the other, because I think that while they are similar, they're also different. When you're hosting an Olympic Games, as I said, it's not about the 2 weeks. The 2 weeks will come and go, but what you're trying to achieve at the larger level is what needs to be considered. How the Olympic Games are going to act as a catalyst for further development of your country. So you have to see that in that prism almost. And of course, development of athletes, again, is a long-term process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a long-term play, and it kind of has to happen in parallel. I think, if you want to be a host, you also would like a strong performance of your athletes. And our performances in sport are certainly improving. I think with the Asian Games, when the slogan came out of 100 odd medals, whoever I spoke to laughed to it. Many of you probably doubted it as well. How many of you thought that we'll win 100? Maybe I can ask you a question.
I did. Yeah.
So thank you for that. But it happened. We won 107 medals. So obviously, there are certain things that are happening. Now, of course, it will be interesting to see how the performances at the Continental Games translate at the Olympic level, because it's completely a different story there. A lot of the events that are at the Asian Games will not feature at the Olympic Games. So, of course, to expect that sort of a medal tally is not going to happen. But what is going to be important is, are we going to make an improvement from the 7 odd medals that we won last time around, and are we going to make that significant leap or go into double digits, etc. So that is what we will have to wait and see. But of course, you have to develop both. I think when you're looking at hosting a games, you have to look at it from a very much larger prism. It is not just about the 2 weeks of sporting action. Developing athletes is a long-term play that needs to happen at all levels. It needs to start at a community level, then it goes to grassroots sport, and then it goes to elite sport. And that again, you have to see it from a larger prism. Again, if you're going to spend billions of dollars on just elite athletes training, it would, again, I would say, be a mistake. You have to look at sports role at a much larger level, and then elite sport and elite performance will almost become kind of a byproduct. Is what my thinking. Difficult to pick favorite medal, because there were so many fantastic performances by a young athlete, by a lot of athletes in different sports. Watching that table tennis medal come by was interesting. Watching a lot of our shooters win was spectacular, winning with world records, etc. was really wonderful to see. But I enjoy a variety of sport, but I'm looking forward to breaking like yourself at Paris. So I'm a big fan of breaking, for example. I never really thought of much of it as a sport until I actually saw it for the first time at the Youth Olympic Games in Argentina for the first time. And I was completely blown away by the sport. Also a sport like climbing. Sport climbing for me is quite interesting. I loved what archery did. Archery is a sport which has done really well to remain extremely relevant in terms of their broadcast. And that is something, a lot of inspiration my sport needs to take from archery. How they introduced heart rate into the broadcast, which is a very fascinating aspect of that production and of showcasing what the athlete is really going through. So that was something which is always fascinating to watch. Of course, the IOC session was very successfully held. I think it was one of the best IOC sessions organized. And there, of course, credit goes to Mrs. Ambani and her who have led it and organized it in such a grand and magnificent manner. It was flawless in every respect. And I know that all the delegates who came to Mumbai went back with rich memories. Of course, I think it also, I think what the IOC session has managed to achieve is showcase our potential. I think our growing potential, not just in sport, but I think just the overall development that is happening in the country. I think, it is in both the interest of the IOC and both in our country's interest to engage with the Olympic movement. Firstly, from the IOC side, to engage with the world's largest population and the world's youngest population. I think it's very, very important as well. It is a market, or it is a country where I think the IOC has been trying for many years to really come in a meaningful way and really have a meaningful presence. And, I think the wheels are slowly starting to turn there. I think just in general, there is far more interest in Olympic sport. Consumption of Olympic sport is at a big high. You saw those numbers of which were made. I think Neeraj Chopra's gold medal winning time had the most amount of engagement on social media than anything had during the games. So it is a very, very important place for the IOC. I think from India's point of view, a growing country, I think what I would like to start off by saying is, I think, of course, India is certainly starting to embrace sport in a way which it has never done at the level it has in terms of supporting athletes, getting behind athletes, and all credit goes there to the government to really prioritize sport in many ways. And those we are slowly starting to see those results also come through. But I think what really needs to happen going forward, I think, as a nation, we need to embrace sport in many different ways. And sport's role is not just limited to athletes winning medals at the Olympics or winning medals at different tournaments. That is one aspect of sport. But if you look at it from a larger level, if you look at sports, the real power of sport really lies on how sport can be a meaningful thing for the overall development of society, of the overall development of our nation, of our nation, which has such a young population. And their, sports role, and of course, specifically the Olympic movement's role in its alignment with achieving the UN SDGs, whether it be promoting health, sport has to play a much more meaningful role in our nation, I think, in achieving that. So it cannot just be limited to policies in our athletes, preparing our athletes, but sport also has to take a more meaningful role in how it can promote good health, for example. So it has to permeate into different policy in different verticals, whether it be education. You would all agree that there is no better education in terms of teaching important life skills and building character than sport. So how can sport play a more effective role in that, in areas of gender equality, how sport can break glass ceilings, how sport can really empower women and girls to break stereotypes, and that is slowly starting to happen as well. You've seen it in different areas, different athletes doing so well and becoming role models, and that has also helped this aspect. Economic growth, I mean, sport is becoming a very powerful industry in terms of creating job opportunities for so many people. So sports role is there. How can it be? How can sport play a more important role there? Needs to be thought out. And of course, building sustainable cities, building communities, whether building sports role in the role of peace, in unifying. There's no better way than sport to unify people and unify communities. So I think that we need to also start thinking of sports' larger role. And I think that is very, very important when you come to that question of hosting the games and things like that. The games are going to last 2 weeks, and we have to think on how the games will act as a catalyst to all this development and all these aspects that I just briefly touched upon.